salt. And the sad thing is, that too many people, indeed some of the people who've been negotiating this deal, seem to regard Brexit as a disaster to be managed rather than an opportunity. And I'm afraid they also see bad news. They see bad news as a vindication of that judgment and actually talk up bad news as a result. And in taking that attitude, I'm afraid they are badly misunderstanding the instincts of the people of this country, who didn't vote for Brexit out of hate. They didn't vote for Brexit out of hate, as I think the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff tweeted after the referendum. But they voted to take back control of our laws because they believe, and I think rightly, that if we govern ourselves and if we legislate in the interests of the UK economy, then they have a better chance. They have a better chance of good jobs and higher wages and cheaper food and clothes and a brighter future, all of which are possible under a proper Brexit, and none of which can be delivered by this deal. And above all, if we vote through this apology for Brexit, we will be showing that we have treated the 17.4 million people, the highest number of people ever to vote for a single proposition, with contempt. With contempt. We will be turning our backs on those people. And this country must understand that when the people of this country voted to leave in 2016, they voted for change. They did not vote for an endless transition or a thinly disguised version of the status quo. They voted for freedom, and they voted for independence, and they voted for a better Britain, and for a country where politicians actually listen to what the people say. And I may say to the House that if we try to cheat them now, as I fear that we are trying to cheat them, they will spot it and they will never forgive us.
Miss Rhian Blackford.
That was Boris Johnson, and you can see that debate continuing on BBC Parliament. We're going to continue listening as the SNP leader, Ian Blackford, makes his points. We'll continue listening to this live debate in the House of Commons after the government has been defeated 3 times tonight. More on that later. Let's listen in.
The reality of Brexit is now laid before us. Broken promises of taking back control from a government that is so out of control. 21 ministerial resignations, communities, countries, households divided, our politics state. A Prime Minister fighting for her political life. Mr. Speaker, the past number of months have been filled with political drama, theatre, squabbles and chaos. From crisis to crisis, this government hangs on by a thread. But beneath all of this is the real reality, the hard, cold truth that this is a moment of self-harm in our history. History has a way of teaching us lessons, if only we would listen. At a moment such as this, I reflect on someone that we regard as an icon. Winnie Ewing, Madam Cross, who came into this House 51 years ago for the seat of Hamilton, represented the Highlands and Islands at the European Parliament and fought hard to make sure that Scotland benefited from its membership of the European Parliament. Something I can see right throughout my constituency, with all the signs of projects that were funded by European money. And we had a welcome year in the European Parliament, and indeed Winnie played such an important part in the development of that institution. We've heard of the importance of Erasmus today, and it holds a special place in the SNP's heart, because it was Winnie Ewing who chaired the European Parliament's European and Culture Committee on Erasmus when it was established in the 1980s. That's the legacy of someone that fought hard to make sure that all of us benefited from that European membership. And if I can contrast the approach that we've had from Europe with this place, and I want to quote from the great lady herself: "Time after time, on matters great and small, We are still standing on the sidelines, mutely accepting what is decided elsewhere, instead of raising our voices and making our own choices.
Hear, hear.
Scotland's much vaunted partnership of Jonah and the whale. Mr. Speaker, respect for human dignity, human rights, freedom, democracy, equality and the rule of law. These are the core values of the European Union. Values that have united, not divided us as citizens of Europe now for many years. Values that are now ingrained in our society to be cherished and protected, not discarded or eroded. I am proud and privileged to be a citizen of the European Union. Mr. Speaker, the European Union has been the greatest peace project in our lifetime. A peace project born out of the horrors of 2 world wars that ripped Europe apart. A project that has gone on to change the course of our communities and improve citizens' rights and opportunities across the continent, not just now. A project that I still believe is worth defending, and we will, on these benches, defend that. A project that has enabled our generations to travel, to work, to live and to thrive across all countries that are within the European Union. Mr. Speaker, today I come here with a heavy heart, with the deepest regret that the opportunities that I had to work in Amsterdam, but also to travel throughout Europe in my working career, to learn from the best and the brightest across Europe, will be taken from our children. Because that's what we're doing. Embracing the diversity of European culture has enriched so many of us.
Absolutely.
The exciting opportunities to live and work in Amsterdam or Barcelona or Brussels or Berlin or Copenhagen or Vienna or so many other places. So many choices and opportunities that our generation had to work and friendships across Europe. Mr. Speaker, to learn from the rich diversity that Europe has to offer, to benefit from the experiences of different cultures, to form friendships with those like us who celebrated being European citizens with shared rights. The right to live and work across the EU is to be ended as a right for the next generation. Mr. Speaker, I have in the gallery today an ex-colleague from Amsterdam when I worked for a bakery ingredients company, someone whose friendship was formed out of the opportunity that I had to work in Amsterdam. Our friendship is a celebration of the success of the opportunities the EU membership gave to all of us. That right to live and work together across the EU is to be ended as a right for the next generation. That automatic right to benefit from career opportunities to be removed. Opportunities to benefit from an inclusive Europe swapped for the constraints of an inward-looking United Kingdom. I'll give way to the...
I thank my right honourable friend giving way. Most people in this chamber know that my husband is German. What not all of them will know is that his mother
You're
was
watching
Polish.
BBC News. We've been live in the House of Commons for hours of political drama this evening. You can watch that debate continuing on the BBC Parliament channel. Good evening. The government has been defeated 3 times in Commons votes on the Brexit process. MPs found the government in contempt of Parliament over its refusal to publish its legal advice on the Prime Minister's deal. In an abrupt climb down, the Commons leader, Andrea Leadsom, said the government would provide the full legal text tomorrow. Then the government was defeated in another vote, giving Parliament more powers to control the Brexit process if Theresa May's deal is rejected by MPs. Well, it all comes as MPs embark on 5 days of debate on the government's Brexit plans, leading to the vote next Tuesday, billed as one of the most significant parliamentary events of recent times. In yet another twist, the European Court of Justice has been told that the UK could stop the Brexit process on its own without EU approval. Well, the Prime Minister was on her feet for an hour this evening defending her deal. It's been strongly criticised by Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, and by the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. And we can speak now to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who is in central lobby for us. And Vicky, it has been An evening of real political drama and a series of blows inflicted on the government.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is absolutely not what Theresa May wanted. You remember, she's been on this tour of the United Kingdom trying to sell her deal, and then she was due to come here, of course, and sell the deal to MPs. You know, some seeing this as a last chance, really, to get the House of Commons behind her, to back her in that vote next Tuesday. But of course, this was not what she wanted as the warm-up act, if you like. She had 3 defeats, I think the most that's happened in one day for a government for a very, very long time. And if we just go back to the first of those, this was a row about the government refusing to publish in full its legal advice, the Brexit legal advice that it has given to the Cabinet. The House of Commons last month voted and said that Parliament and the government must publish that. The government refused, and so they ended up today facing this censure, really, this motion saying that they were in contempt of Parliament. Now, in the end, that went through. The government was defeated on all of that, and this is how Labour reacted with Sir Keir Starmer.
This House has now spoken, and it's of huge constitutional and political significance. It is, I think, unprecedented for this House to find government ministers in contempt. The motion makes clear the government must now publish the Attorney-General's final legal advice in full.
Now, the leader of the House of Commons stood up and reacted to that, Andrea Leadsom, and she said the government had listened, and she said that they would now publish the final full legal advice given by the Attorney-General. She said the government will respond tomorrow. She didn't say they were going to publish it. She also said that she would refer the matter to the Privileges Committee because she said it was breaking such a precedent that she felt that they needed to look at it. Now, Theresa May, after all of that, went on to talk about the vote and saying that people had to get behind her deal. She said it had to be a compromise. At one point she said this argument has gone on long enough, it's corrosive to politics, and life depends on compromise.
We should not let the search for the perfect Brexit prevent a good Brexit that delivers for the British people. And we should not contemplate a course that fails to respect the result of the referendum, because it would decimate the trust of millions of people in our politics for a generation.
Well, the Labour leader responded to all of that. Labour, of course, not happy with the Prime Minister's deal. They have said that they will vote against it. The numbers not, of course, looking good for her. They want a closer relationship with the EU. Jeremy Corbyn characterises it as a jobs-first Brexit, but as things stand, Labour MPs and the Leader of the Opposition will be voting against.
This House will make its decision next Tuesday. I hope and expect this House will reject that deal. At that point, the government has lost the confidence of the House. I think they should reflect on that. Either they've got to get a better deal from the EU or give way to those who will.
But perhaps the most significant moment of the day was when 26 Conservative MPs decided to rebel against the government. Now, this was an amendment put down by the former Attorney-General Dominic Grieve. He himself wants to have a second referendum on all of this. But what he was trying to do was to look ahead to see what could happen if Parliament is deadlocked. If Theresa May's deal is voted down next Tuesday, Parliament can't decide what to do next. He wants MPs to have a much bigger say in the next step. So this amendment was put down, and in the end it was a pretty clear defeat for the government once again. And I think many people will look back on that as a pretty significant moment, because Theresa May's deal is voted down. It could be Parliament now that has a say in what happens next. And I think it makes the prospect of a no-deal exit from the EU less likely. It could even focus the minds of Brexiteers, because they may look at it and realise that actually, if they vote down Theresa May's deal, the only thing that will happen is they end up in a closer relationship with the EU than the one that she is offering.
OK, Vicky, for now, many thanks for the latest from the House of Commons. The BBC has dropped plans to hold a Brexit debate between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, saying it could not reach an agreement on its proposal. Both the BBC and ITV had offered to air the debate between party leaders on Sunday. Labour said the BBC's proposed format, including a range of voices, was a mishmash. ITV says invitations remain open to both leaders to hold a debate on the channel at the end of the week. And we're going to find out how this story and many others are covered in tomorrow's front pages at 10:40 this evening in the papers. Our guests joining me tonight are Owen Bennett, Head of Politics at City AM, and Helen Brand, Chief Executive of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Now, the latest headlines here on BBC News. The government has suffered 3 Brexit defeats in the Commons. Full legal Brexit advice will now be published after a contempt of Parliament vote. The Prime Minister has opened 5 days of debate, setting out the case in the Commons for her Brexit deal, which she described as an honourable compromise. The BBC has pulled out of a Brexit TV debate between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn after failing to reach agreement. Sport now, and let's just catch up with a full roundup from the BBC Sports Centre and join Sarah this evening. Hello.
Thanks very much, Carol. Let's start with some football then. And Manchester City can stretch their lead at the top of the table to 5 points tonight. That is one of 4 games in the Premier League. Let's have a look at how they are going so far. Bournemouth are 2-0 up against Huddersfield, thanks to goals from Callum Wilson and Ryan Fraser. A win would see them move up to 6th. Brighton are 2-0 up against Palace. The Glenn Murray penalty there. West Ham are hosting Cardiff after good wins for both at the weekend. Watford against Manchester City was an 8 o'clock kickoff, goalless after 18 minutes there. Russian athletes will remain banned from international competitions after the IAAF upheld the country's suspension into 2019. Athletics governing body banned Russia in November 2015 because of evidence of state-sponsored doping, and the ban will remain in place until samples and data from Moscow's former anti-doping laboratory are made available. Russia must also pay all costs incurred by the work of the IAAF's task force.
Our philosophy from the very outset has been, can we separate the clean athletes from the tainted system? So over 30 Russian athletes are competing internationally. They're competing as neutrals. The remainder of that journey, which will be the reinstatement of the Athletics Federation, will depend on the full completion of that criteria.
England are still waiting for their first win at the Hockey World Cup in India after drawing with China in their opening pool game. They were soundly beaten by 2-time defending champions Australia. 3-0 the score there. Ireland came from behind to draw with China. The match was goalless until well into the 3rd quarter, but 2 goals in 2 minutes, including this equaliser here from Alan Southern, earned Ireland their first point at the tournament. Now in snooker's UK Championship, Judd Trump has qualified for the 4th round. The world number 5 made an impressive start, leading 3-1 over Mark King in only 50 minutes. He closed out victory by 6 frames to 2 in York. Meanwhile, Neil Robertson trailed by 2 frames in his decider against Graham Dott, but the 2-time UK champion responded in style. The Australian is into the last 16 at the UK Snooker Championship. That sealed it. And this evening's 3rd round matches are taking place right now. This, an all-Chinese Tai Ding Junhui is playing Zhao Guangdong on table 1. And then on the other table, Northern Ireland's Mark Allen is playing Iran's Hossein Fafay on table 2. You can also follow that on the website. And 2 other ties see Englishmen Gary Wilson and Barry Hawkins also in action, and Thailand's Sunny Akani is up against Welshman Jack Jones. You can find plenty more on those stories on the BBC Sport website. That's also where you can follow all the football this evening. That is bbc.co.uk/sport. We'll be back again soon.
Sarah, many thanks. The Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, has admitted that he and his department did not ask tough enough questions before new timetables were brought in on Northern and Govia Thameslink routes in May, causing chaos. His admission comes after a report by MPs said he should have been more proactive. The timetable change in May was the biggest shake-up of its type in a generation. It involved more than 40,000 changes, affecting nearly half of the services. It mainly affected northern trains operated by Arriva Rail North and Govia Thameslink routes into London. For several weeks, up to 780 trains were cancelled each weekday. Well, the Rail Delivery Group, which represents rail companies, said it was very sorry for what happened in the summer, but for many passengers, the problems still continue, as Danny Savage reports.
7 months after the timetable debacle, things have not improved for many passengers. This northern service from Bolton this morning was so crowded, people couldn't get on. On a following train, there was dismay.
It already cost me about £8 a day to get in and out of Manchester, and then it's going to go up, so no, I'm not happy about it.
I mean, the amount of investment that goes into southern transport, and it shouldn't have to be a comparison, there should be money for everybody. People in the south should be able to have good transport, but we also deserve good transport here as well.
Over in Doncaster, the 6:57 to Leeds left on time, testament perhaps to the power of complaining. Vanessa Bremner has a pile of letters from her MP and Northern Rail about delays and cancellations.
It's just been the same as it was back in the summer. We haven't had a single train that has arrived on time since October, and that was only one day. You know, it's just still ongoing.
For months now, the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, has been lampooned in the regional press in the north over rail problems. Today he was also criticised by his parliamentary colleagues and admitted mistakes.
Clearly we didn't ask tough enough questions. The reality is that at no point did I get the information that I would have needed to intervene.
MPs are now recommending discounts for the worst affected season ticket holders, independent oversight of timetable changes and simplifying compensation. The leader of Leeds City Council was also asked to investigate the problems over the summer.
You're talking about passengers who still are getting to work late, unable to get home to pick their kids up from the childminders. All of these things are still happening, and it's absolutely crucial that we put passengers at the heart of everything that we do.
This was commuter Chris Ellaby's view on his way home last night.
They need to understand what actually people go through. The people who are relying on this, for their living each day, understand that it is causing problems. It is causing issues with their work, with their family life at home.
Govia Thameslink has also been told it must contribute £15 million towards improvements after the chaos of last summer. Danny Savage, BBC News.
More than 2,000 children in England with special educational needs and disabilities were not given the support they needed at school last year. That's according to the education watchdog Ofsted. The regulator's annual report describes the failure as a national scandal. Our education editor Branwen Jeffries has more.
Jamie loves school. Cooking is one of his extra lessons with the special needs teacher, Mrs. Cassidy.
The school is really big, really enjoying, and we like doing cooking and doing objects, and we like looking after our Sanko, Mrs. Cassidy, and
this school is known for its support for special needs. It hasn't excluded any pupils for 7 years, but there's growing concern that others are more ruthless.
What we're concerned is we've seen a pattern of sort of increasing rates of exclusion for children with special needs. It looks as though that it's even more becoming even more difficult for them to do well in mainstream school.
Around 15% of all pupils have a special need or disability. 27% of these pupils had a fixed-term exclusion last year. At the same time, families faced delays. More than 2,000 children with severe needs were waiting for a suitable place, 3 times more than in 2010. Ofsted is beginning to change the way it inspects schools, but there's still a heavy emphasis on results. And a bad Ofsted report can be career-ending for a head teacher. Some argue that that pressure is driving the exclusion rate and children being taken off school rolls.
That's nice. That's what I
Sienna has an autism spectrum disorder. She hasn't been in school for more than a year.
don't have a school and I don't have anything to do. I just feel really anxious, sad, upset, worried.
After an incident in which a teacher was hurt, her mum got 3 days' notice she would be leaving the school.
There was no consultation with me or her dad. It was just an email. And when I asked if she was being excluded, I was told no, she wasn't.
Schools, even the best, face growing pressures. Some teachers are frustrated. Ofsted doesn't recognise budgets are one of them. Bronwyn Jeffries, BBC News.
There's a stark warning today that accident and emergency departments are in poor shape ahead of what could be a tough winter. The Royal College of Emergency Medicine, the body that represents A&E doctors, says performance levels are the worst they've been for 20 years. Here's Dominic Hughes.
Another busy day in accident and emergency at Harrogate District Hospital. This is one of a relatively small number of NHS trusts generally meeting the 4-hour A&E target. But even here, they've seen performance slip as winter approaches, and the pressure is already building.
We're not at a stage here where it feels hopeless, but it would be a complete lie to say there aren't days where you think, crikey, how on earth are we going to get through this? We had a record number for us of people needing admission through the day, so Monday was a very challenging day. The team here in the emergency department and the wider hospital had to work really hard.
For months, A&E departments across the country have been planning for winter, but there are still real concerns about just how resilient the system actually is. For the past year, accident and emergency departments right across the UK have been under intense pressure. One of the toughest winters in memory was followed by a summer that saw precious little relief. And as we head into this winter, senior doctors are warning this is a workforce that is really struggling to cope. A survey by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine found that of more than 1,100 A&E doctors who responded, over 900 believe that things can't go on as they have been, or that they're getting worse. Fewer than 50 felt things are getting better. 5 years ago, I met consultant Taj Hassan. He told me then of a crisis in emergency departments. Now he represents A&E doctors across the UK, and it seems that little has changed.
We are entering winter in probably the worst state of performance in emergency departments probably for the last 20 years. When you look at the performance of our departments, we are struggling badly.
The NHS has been promised extra money, but that won't arrive until next year. And it's finding and keeping staff willing to work in the most demanding parts of the health service that's proving difficult.
Workforce is their biggest concern. It's particularly difficult coming into winter, and that's made worse by Brexit. We need to see some short-term action in order to overcome these challenges, as well as a longer-term strategy. It's not just for the NHS, it's for social care as well.
NHS England says more emergency consultants are now working in the health service and that extensive plans for winter are in place. The coming months could see those plans tested to the limit. Dominic Hughes, BBC News, Harrogate.
Lots more ahead on the political drama unfolding at Westminster, but let's just catch up with the weather prospects from Darren Bett.
Hello there. For the southern half of the UK, temperatures are probably going to be rising overnight. That's because we've got more cloud, we've got some outbreaks of rain pushing in from the southwest and heading very slowly northwards. Ahead of that, we've still got the colder air, some mist and fog patches, mainly northeast England through the central belt of Scotland. It's going to be frosty in Scotland, could get down to -6 or so in the northeast of the country, maybe still a touch of frost by the end of the night in the northeast of England, but milder elsewhere. Through tomorrow, that wetter weather continues to work its way very slowly northwards. We may get some snow over the tops of the southern uplands, perhaps into the central highlands if it gets that far north. The rain does then turn to slip its way eastwards, so some heavy rain in the afternoon still for eastern England, drying off further west, particularly in Northern Ireland. But here and for most of England and Wales, it should be a much milder day on Wednesday. Further north, still cold, especially in Scotland. Perhaps in the north of Scotland, only 2 or 3 degrees. Mild for all of us, though. Cloudy, some rain on Thursday, and then it gets very windy on Friday, particularly in the north.
Stories set to shape the news agenda.
Headlines. Freshly written. Original perspectives on the day's unfolding narrative. See the bigger picture as it emerges. The Papers, weeknights at 10:40 on the BBC News Channel.
Hello, this is BBC News with Carol Walker. The headlines. There's been 3 Commons defeats for the Prime Minister in one day. Now the government says it will publish Brexit legal advice in full after MPs find it in contempt of Parliament.
The ayes to the right, 311. The noes to the left, 293.
It's a historic first for government ministers to be found in contempt. Frankly, it should never have come to this.
Amidst the turmoil in Parliament, the Prime Minister has opened 5 days of debate, setting out a case in the Commons for the Brexit deal, which she described as an honourable compromise.
The choice before Parliament is clear. This deal, no deal, or the risk of no Brexit.
In other news, after severe failings with new timetables earlier this year, MPs say genuine change is needed to restore trust in the railways. More than 4,000 children in England with special educational needs and disabilities were not given the support they needed at school last year, according to the Ofsted Chief Inspector. And at 8:40, we'll be looking ahead to this year's Turner Prize Award. Find out the winner live here on the BBC News Channel later this evening. Good evening and welcome to Brexit, the debate. Every evening we'll be looking back at the key moments in the Commons as MPs debate Theresa May's Brexit plan ahead of the vote in Parliament on December the 11th. Well, the BBC's Parliament's Alicia McCarthy will be watching every day this week, and she joins us now from Westminster. And Alicia, what a dramatic start to the 5 days of debate, even before that actual debate got underway. The Commons was in uproar, 3 defeats, and Theresa May then began setting out her case. And just tell us a bit more about what she had to say to MPs and the sort of response she got.
Well, as you say, what a dramatic backdrop for Theresa May to stand up and to start to try to make her case once again. And it was a very familiar case. She made it with passion, but she said as far as she was concerned, this was the best deal. And in fact, it was the only deal. Now, Westminster watchers will know that the last few days when Theresa May has been making statements to the Commons, it's taken quite a long time before we've heard supportive voices from her own side, MPs on her own side who back her. This time there were more of those voices, and they did come a little earlier. This is the Conservative Vicky Ford, who, as well as being an MP, used to be a member of the European Parliament.
Some of my colleagues in this House seem to think that if they reject this deal on Tuesday, the other EU 27 leaders will come back and give us something better. Why should they?
And Theresa May said that was exactly the point. There was no better deal, and why should the EU offer it?
She seemed to be saying that it was the best compromise available, but clearly there are many on her own side who don't like it and are prepared to vote against it. Just tell us a bit more about that.
Well, that's right. Now, the first of the backbench MPs to be called was Boris Johnson. You'll all remember him. Used to be in her cabinet. He clearly didn't like this deal, and he said that he didn't think that the government's heart was in it. But interestingly, watch this exchange between him and a fellow Conservative backbencher who also used to be a government minister called Ed Vaizey.
I really can't believe that there is a single member of this House who sincerely believes that this deal we have before us is a good deal for the UK. And if I may say, you can tell, there we go, there's one. There's one. There's one. And I must say, I said sincerely. I said sincere. I said sincere. And you can tell that the government's heart...
Order. Forgive me. Oh, sorry. Point of order, Mr Edward Vasey.
I sincerely believe it. I've got no stake in this government anymore, but I still think it's the right thing to do.
There you are, so that's Ed Vasey and Boris Johnson. And if you're wondering who the MP was sitting right behind Boris Johnson there, that was Sir Roger Gale, and he clearly didn't agree with Boris Johnson either.
So the divisions on the Conservative benches really laid bare for us there. Now, Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, of course, is facing some divisions in his own party. Just tell us a bit more about how he responded to this debate.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn is still saying that this, as far as he's concerned, is a botched deal and the government has got it wrong. And he said that the two MPs who used to be Brexit Secretary, David Davis and Dominic Raab, neither of them were backing this deal either. But as you mentioned there, of course, there are divisions within the Labour Party too. So this is the respective backbencher Chris Leslie, and here he is setting out perhaps a different way forward to the one that Jeremy Corbyn might be endorsing.
But I agree this is a bad deal. Doesn't he agree that our country would be better off remaining in the European Union than exiting on the basis of this deal?
But Jeremy Corbyn said that Labour had been elected, it had stood at the last election on the idea of respecting the result of the referendum, so he wasn't going to endorse what Chris Leslie was suggesting.
Now, this debate is going to go on right into the wee small hours tonight, and we've got another 4 days of debate afterwards. As we approach this crucial vote a week from tonight, positions seem quite entrenched, but is there any sign of any fresh thinking?
Well, that's right. You might have thought that MPs, from what they've been saying when they've been out and about and speaking on the media, have all pretty much made up their minds. But that's not to say that there aren't a few fresh ideas floating around. Have a listen to this. Now, this is another Conservative, and this is George Freeman.
Given that this issue divides all parties in this House, indeed on this side it even divides the factions, would it not be sensible next week, as Parliament begins to take back control, to consider a free vote?
Now, what's significant about that? A free vote is something where MPs can vote with their conscience, not along the lines that their party tells them to. It's traditionally used for issues like, I don't know, abortion or fox hunting, something like that. So he's suggesting that all MPs should be free to vote whichever way they wanted. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, Theresa May wasn't backing that idea.
No, she faces quite a battle on her hands if she has any prospect of keeping her deal alive. And of course, we shouldn't forget the SNP, the Scottish Nationalists, now a really significant bloc in Parliament.
That's right, the third biggest party at Westminster. So what did they think of this deal? Well, their leader at Westminster, Ian Blackford, didn't like it either.
Mr. Speaker, the past number of months have been filled with political drama, theatre, squabbles and chaos. From crisis to crisis, this government hangs on by a thread. But beneath all of this is the real reality, the hard, cold truth that this is a moment of self-harm in our history.
And he said that history could teach us really valuable lessons if we were prepared to listen to them. Now, MPs are going to carry on with this debate until about 1 o'clock tomorrow morning, and when they finally finish then, they've got another 4 days of this debate to go.
Alicia, I know you're going to be across every moment of it. For now, many thanks for the latest from Westminster. Now, it is one of art's most prestigious awards. The Turner Prize will be announced this evening in central London. Previous winners have included Damien Hirst, Grayson Perry and Steve McQueen. But this year, for the first time, there's not a painting in sight. Our arts editor, Will Gompertz, is there for us now. Will.
Yeah, well, welcome to Tate Britain, where I think you've got an outside shot of two giant slugs. That's an artwork. Inside here in the Devine Galleries, we've got the great and the good of the art world who are gathered to find out who is going to be the winner of this year's Turner Prize. Back in 1984, at the first show, which was in this actual space, it was by a painter called Malcolm Morley. The shortlist included painters and sculptors. None of that sort of stuff is in this Turner Prize at all this year. It's all filmmakers. To make sense of this year's shortlist and of the Turner Prize itself, I've got two terrific guests. I've got Ivana Blazwick, the director of the Whitechapel Gallery, and Martin Creed, who won the Turner Prize back in 2001 for switching lights on and off. Ivona, let's start with you and this year's Turner Prize. All filmmakers, no painting, no sculpture. Does it mean that those traditional forms of making art are sort of out of fashion or irrelevant even?
Not at all. You know, there's still fantastically strong work being made across mediums. But what this does do is identify a zeitgeist, a kind of spirit of the times where the idea of time-based work, where you can see a narrative unfolding, where you can grab your audience and capture them in some kind of a drama, something where they get entranced in a sequence of events and processes.
A story.
And a story is capturing the imagination of many, many young artists today. It's also very ubiquitous. We've all got that possibility of using our phones to make a film, and I think that dominant technology is something that what this exhibition is reflecting at the moment.
Okay, now Martin, you've made work using film, of course. You won the Turner Prize here in 2001. I don't think you've seen this show yet, have you?
No.
So the question I want to ask you is, A, what's with the hats?
I couldn't decide what to wear, so...
And the glasses?
Aye, but I don't know, yeah.
And what does it mean for an artist to win the Turner Prize?
I don't know. I often wish I hadn't have won it.
Really?
Because it only encouraged me, you know. I think if you think you can win at life, you know, that's not a good idea. And so I think maybe if I hadn't have won it, I might have learned more.
Really?
Aye, and I think I did art in the first place because I hated exams at school and I hated any kind of like winning or losing, you know. Then I found myself in this thing, but I had a good time as well.
Okay, right. Well, let's have a quick look at some of the artists in this year's shortlist. Our art correspondent Rebecca Jones has been to make this short film.
Okay. It doesn't look much at first glance, but please bear with me. If you come to the Turner Prize, this is where you find yourself first, which, let's face it, does look a bit like a dentist's waiting room. But can you see the 4 doors off into the dark? These are what matter, because they lead to each of the 4 exhibits, which this year are all films. When you walk into this room, it's at first a bit confusing and actually rather claustrophobic. It's dark, it's disorientating, and it's dominated by this floor-to-ceiling screen. This film is about a police raid on a Bedouin village in the desert in southern Israel last year, during which 2 people were killed. And it was shot by a camerawoman who was trying to avoid gunfire. So it's jerky, blurry, pretty hectic stuff. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the lead curator of the exhibition, Lindsay Young. This film is made by a group of people called Forensic Architecture. Who are they exactly?
So Forensic Architecture are a research agency and they're based at Goldsmiths University. They were founded by an architect in 2010 and the agency is formed of a number of people, kind of up to 25 people who are architects, lawyers, a huge kind of range of skills, and they each employ their kind of interdisciplinary talents to investigating allegations of state and corporate violence.
So how do they do that?
People send them images of things that have happened. For example, Karen Manur, the filmmaker here, sent this footage to them, and then they've analysed it to kind of extrapolate what happened during that day.
Forensic Architecture don't actually call themselves artists, so what is their film doing here in an art exhibition?
They use exhibitions to really expand the reach of what they do. They work across courtrooms, they write books, there are many ways their work can be seen, but one of the most direct ways to reach the public is through exhibitions.
Lindsay Young for now, thank you. So while Forensic Architecture are looking at real events, our next artist, Naeem Mohaimin, has created a fictional film, and it's an hour and a half, so I'm quite relieved there are some chairs to sit on in here. There's just one character in this film, and it's about a man who spends a decade living alone in an abandoned airport. And it was actually inspired by the experiences of Naeem Mohaimin's own father, who was stranded at Athens airport in the 1970s for 9 days after he lost his passport. The co-curator of the exhibition, Elsa Cousteau, is here with me, and Naeem Mohaimin has an interesting family background, doesn't he? Tell us a bit more about him.
Naeem Mohamed was born in London in 1969 to Bengali parents. They moved to Dhaka, where he grew up. He then got a scholarship to study in the United States, where he started making documentary films.
People might remember the Tom Hanks film Terminal, about a man stuck at an airport, and indeed this is the length of a feature film, so you might wonder perhaps it should be in contention for the Oscars rather than the Turner Prize.
This is a film that is very slow and contemplative. The images are very meditative. It's a film about boredom, loneliness, and what it means to live in exile.
And this is one of two films being exhibited by Naeem Mohamed. The other is being displayed on 3 screens, and it's about the history and politics of countries in South Asia from colonial rule in the 1960s, 70s and 80s. What links the two films, Elsa?
What's bringing them together is Naeem's desire to make sense of the 70s, political utopias and past events that he could understand when he was growing up.
Elsa Cousteau, for now, many thanks. And you've now seen the work of the first 2 artists shortlisted for the Turner Prize this year, Naeem Mohamed, and before that, Forensic Architecture.
Great stuff. Well, more from Rebecca in a minute, but before that, I've got 2 of the art world's biggest hitters in the shape of 2 Victorias. I've got Victoria Siddle, who is in charge of the Frieze Art Fairs, and Victoria Pomery, who's the director of the Turner Contemporary in Margate. Let me start with you, Victoria, because you put on shows which contain a huge amount of art. This is 4 films, which take about 5 hours to watch. Given that most people haven't got 5 hours to spare, how do you navigate them? How do you get something out of this exhibition if maybe you've only got half an hour to see it?
I mean, I think it's interesting that these artists are all united by using the moving image, because it's something that we are so familiar with now. We all have phones, we can make films ourselves, we do it every day, we put them on Instagram. And so there's a language there that's very familiar to us. There's a lot to take in this exhibition. I came twice before I could really get my head around it. But the interesting thing is that they're all so different from each other. So each one is an incredibly fresh and different experience to the last.
How long do you need?
To see everything, probably 4 or 5 hours.
Wow. Okay, Victoria Pomery, you run the Turner Contemporary. This is called the Turner Prize because of Turner, the great romantic artist, because he was radical. How radical is this show?
Well, I think this is a really radical show. The work is fantastically innovative. We have got Charlotte Prodger filming an entire film from her phone, which seems absolutely incredible. I think Turner would have been very proud of this working today, using new technology, but also really engaging with the world. The subject matter is of the world, and it's really contemporary and issue-based, and I think that's so important, and that was important in Turner's time too.
Fantastic, Victoria, thank you very much. We're going to see another short film from Rebecca Jones, our arts correspondent, who looks at the other 2 contenders for this year's Turner Prize.
Now, before we see the work of the next artist, Willis Thompson, I want you to have a look and listen. This is the sound of old-fashioned technology. 35mm film clattering through this giant projector. And it's actually the only noise in this room because Luke Willis Thompson's films are silent. This is a portrait of Diamond Reynolds, whose partner was shot by police in America in 2016, an event that she streamed live on Facebook. Elsa Cousteau is here with me. Elsa, how did this work come about?
So Luke saw Diamond Reynolds' video online, like millions of others, and he was affected by it. So I got in touch with her, and together they decided to do this second broadcast, which would be really different from all the other images of her that were circulating online.
Well, Luke Willis Thompson is also showing 2 other films of young black men whose relatives have been killed by police. And Elsa, what more can you tell me about Thompson and I suppose his main focus with these films?
So Luke is the youngest this year of the nominees. He's in New Zealand. He's of both European and Fijian descent. Really his works, and especially the trilogy of films he's showing here in the Turner Prize, reframe his stories of violence enacted upon certain individuals.
Well, Luke Willis Thompson has also made a film of a tiny sculpture of a little house which was made using scraps of shed skin held together with sellotape and pins. And this is also a slightly strange one, not least because the house itself was actually made by another artist. So why did Luke Willis Thompson want to film it?
It's actually a very personal work because it was made a few years after Luke found out about a genetic condition that was running through his own family, so you can see this work as a portrait of the artist himself.
Elsa Cousteau, thank you.
3D animator who made the grid.
From 35mm film to the most modern of mobile technologies, the smartphone. And I want you to have a look at the work of Charlotte Prodger now, because she spent a year making a film shot entirely on her iPhone. Charlotte Prodger was born in Bournemouth but grew up in Aberdeenshire, and her film is an autobiographical one about coming out as gay in rural Scotland. There's no linear narrative. Instead, she shoots scenes of her home, her cat and the Scottish countryside. She also uses music and readings from her own diaries. Lindsay Young is here. Lindsay, why make a film shot entirely on a smartphone?
Charlotte's very interested in the relation to technology in the body, and some of the practical things about an iPhone make it really interesting to her. So when she holds it, you often see the movement of her breathing, because it's very lightweight. Also, sometimes she puts her thumb across the lens and you'll see her blood moving through it. Also, she loves to film on her own and to go out into the countryside, and not having a film crew is possible using the iPhone.
We live in an age where, let's face it, everyone has a camera in their pocket. So what makes this film so special?
So I think the themes of Charlotte's work are some that are very pertinent to us. Major kind of focuses of all of her work is queer identity, but she's also interested in notions of independence.
The film is fragmentary, quite impressionistic, and yet I feel we're watching it in quite a formal setting, sat here on these benches. Why is that?
So Charlotte works with sculpture as well, and that background in sculpture really informs these installations. So she thinks that the entire thing is a sculptural environment, and you're really being invited into her world when you come into one of these rooms.
So I'm guessing we're not going to be served popcorn here then. Lindsay Young, thank you. So that's the work of Charlotte Prodger, and before that, Luke Willis-Thompson. You've now seen all 4 artists shortlisted for the Turner Prize this year. The only question left is who's going to win.
So who indeed is going to win? Everybody in this room wants to know. I want to know. You can find out in about an hour's time by joining us for our live Turner Prize show here in the Devines Gallery at 9:30.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Back with you for that. Now, a review into an immigration removal centre run by the G4S security firm says some staff there acted in a draconian way and indulged in laddish behaviour. The review follows secret filming at the Brook House Centre near Gatwick Airport, in which detainees were seen being verbally and physically abused. Our Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw reports.
Outside Brook House Immigration Centre. These were the images captured by a BBC reporter who got a job there. He used a hidden camera and showed staff struggling to cope. He heard detainees being threatened and filmed force being used excessively. Now an independent report has revealed why it went so wrong at Brook House. The report describes a laddish culture among some staff, with certain managers seen as unapproachable and draconian. That, the report concluded, presented opportunities for some stronger personalities to gain undue influence, leading them sometimes to behave in inappropriate ways without being challenged.
I think the main issues in this report that have been identified is understaffing, staff out of control, and it is ultimately affecting detainee welfare.
The report accepts some of the 300 immigration detainees are difficult to deal with, but it says violence wasn't managed properly.
The report describes one shocking incident when staff thought they'd lost control of the centre.